Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Babies in Common Show. I'm Jeanette.
And I'm Melissa. Welcome, listeners. Please note that any information shared during the show is not to be taken as medical advice. Please consult your own care providers for questions about you or your baby's health and visit babiesincommon.com/disclaimer to learn more.
So, on today's show, we are going to circle back around and talk about infertility. But today, we're going to be busting some infertility myths with Kate Rosenkranz, who is a longtime friend of Melissa.
Yes, I am super excited to have you here today, Kate. Like me, Kate had an infertility journey before a successful pregnancy. And I admire Kate for so many things, including her prolific knitting, her incredible eye for design, her love of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. As you can notice, we have dueling RBG dolls behind us, and her amazing color guard skills. Go UMass Minutemen. But most importantly, her willingness to be outspoken about her personal infertility struggles, as well as her advocacy for infertility awareness and support.
Cool. So, as Melissa said, Kate graduated from the University of Massachusetts in 2009 with a degree in art and settled on the North Shore of Massachusetts. It's technically in, right? But in Massachusetts, we say on the North Shore.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. Not being from Massachusetts myself, I've noticed those little things like that. In 2015, she married her husband, Matt, and the next year decided to start trying for a baby, as so many newlyweds do. But her efforts would not be successful without medical intervention, as Kate found out in 2016 when she was diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis and fibroids. Her disease was so advanced that she had to undergo a complicated myomectomy, 1 round of in vitro fertilization, and 2 failed transfers before conceiving her son Henry on transfer number 3. Henry was born in November of 2018, and in 2020, Kate and her husband decided to try for another baby and was able to conceive with her first transfer, which was the last of the 4 embryos created from her round of IVF. She gave birth to her daughter Eleanor in November 2020.
And one cool thing about Kate's story is that the embryos that became Henry and Eleanor were fertilized at the same time and were both frozen at the same time. Henry's was used 9 months after being frozen, and Eleanor's was used almost 2.5 years later. So technically, Henry and Eleanor are twins that were born 2 years apart. I think that's such a cool thing about IVF.
Cool.
I wish that nobody had to use IVF, but one
Sure.
cool thing is something like that, right? Like they're technically the same age, but not.
Yeah.
And then also that you get a picture of like when the embryo's fertilized, like you literally see what your kids look like when they're like a ball of cells. It like blows my mind.
I love the idea. Like, I want you when they're old enough to both understand this, and when Eleanor starts to use that against him, like you need to get that on video. You are not older than me. We are the same age.
Exactly.
And then I'll be like, you were both graded the same. You're both B's.
Oh God, that's awesome. I also like to take credit for Henry's conception because it was I who injected Kate's buttocks with progesterone during my sister's bachelorette party in 2018 in the bathroom of the restaurant.
That was actually the day of my transfer. I went to my transfer, I went to a funeral, and then I went to a bachelorette party.
Oh my gosh.
Talk about circle of life there.
Just the dinner part of the bachelorette, though. I was wiped by the end of the day.
I bet. We are so honored to have you on our show today, Kate. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. All right, so let's get started with busting some infertility myths. So our first myth is, if you can't get pregnant, you can just, quote, just do IVF. So why is that a problematic way of thinking?
So many ways.
Let me count the ways.
Let me count the ways. You can't just show up at your doctor's door and be like, IVF, please. It doesn't work like that. Unfortunately, in our field, you have to go through a lot of hoops to get to IVF. You have to usually be trying for 6 to 12 months. And then you have to try medication, and then you have to do IUIs, and then IVF. Not for everybody, of course, but unfortunately, insurance really narrows down your path that you can go on, which is kind of silly, but there's a lot of different boxes you have to check along the way, which stings. And then money-wise, luckily we are in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, most insurance providers are required to cover some sort of infertility coverage, and I think right now it's only 16 states. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's around 16 states that require this. So in all the other states, nothing is covered. And you could be looking at $20,000 to $40,000 for a round of IVF.
Wow.
And that's crazy.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And it's mentally and physically and emotionally exhausting and invasive and draining and
Yeah.
acting like it's just something, I would hear this too when I was going through my journey of trying to get pregnant. People like, oh, you can just do IVF though, and then it'll all be fine. And it's like, also, people don't understand that, even considering doing IVF is a big decision to make, even if it's covered financially. My husband and I, and we're not even religious, we're atheists, but just like the whole, like, we're creating these embryos, what do we do with the embryos if we don't use them all, and it was a really big decision that we were lucky enough to not actually end up having to go through IVF. Our conception was successful with medications alone, but we hadn't entirely made that decision. Like, we were looking at kind of our last chance with the medication before we would have to consider something like IVF. And we hadn't really even made that decision yet before we conceived Pierce. So it's not just this easy thing that people think.
No. Yeah. And then also people say just do IVF, but people forget IVF does not equal a baby.
Right.
There are so many people out there who go through all this, spend all that money and time, and never go home with a baby, which is just heartbreaking.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. I know you posted something on social media during Infertility Awareness Month this year about survivor's guilt.
Yes.
That's definitely something that I have struggled with too, because when Paul and I were going through our journey, we attended some Resolve support groups. So Resolve is a wonderful organization. Resolve.org is their website, and they're just an advocacy, education, resource kind of nonprofit for infertility and people going through infertility. And we made a lot of good friends through this support group. And then we got pregnant, and it was wonderful, right, to get pregnant.
Yeah.
But I also felt like so terrible that we had gotten pregnant, because I didn't know how to like tell the friends that I had made in the support group that we were successful, because there were some people in that support group who were not successful.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard. Can you speak to that at all, Kate?
Oh, definitely. I didn't attend any of the Resolve meetings, but I was in a pretty big IVF support group from Massachusetts, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. It was huge. There was no personality to it really. But then I found like somebody invited me into this little niche group of Massachusetts IVF people, and they are my people. Like I'm still in that group. And then we created an offshoot group just for pregnancy and parenting from that original group. And we stay in that original group to like, help people, show them that, this is, possible scenarios that you could go through, or just, our experience with doctors and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
it's hard.
I was looking at like, what was your process like? So I know you have to have like eggs retrieved. So you have to even make sure that there are eggs that are retrievable. Then you go in for a procedure, and then they look at the eggs, and then they pick the ones that they think look healthy, and then they have to fertilize the eggs, and then they have to see which ones took, so to speak. And then they have to like, and then like the process, they have to put them in you, and then they have to see which ones attach. Like, can you explain a little bit, like for people who don't know what, like, and I even just like put it in very simple layman's terms, but like, can you flesh that out, so to speak, of what that's like?
Have medications, before you even start, you have to go through a lot of testing. You have to have a lot of blood testing done. You have to have HSGs done, sonohistograms to make sure that there's no blocked tubes, and make sure, your uterus looks normal, fairly normal. Lots of testing. They test your AMH, your FSH, all those different fun hormones to tell you, how many eggs you have left, basically.
Yeah, like the quality of your eggs.
Yes.
And at what point are they testing your partner? If your partner is male, at what point are they, or you have a partner, I should say, and it's male?
Same time. They will not start anything until you've both been fully tested.
Oh, good. Okay.
So
Because I remember hearing that it used to be
he was going
different.
for blood work. Yes.
Oh, that's good.
Well, specifically with where I was.
Okay.
That's how it went. I went in for blood work. He went in for blood work. And then he went in for a semen analysis as well.
And then
So
his
it's
job
like-
was over and
and
yours
then-
continued.
all done.
Yeah,
All
sure.
done.
Endometrial biopsy, hysteroscopy,
Yes.
HSG, ultrasounds, like it
Yeah.
just goes on and on.
So you have to go through all those different hoops just to see what their course of action is going to be. And with IVF, it's not like a super precise science. It's kind of a, let's start here, see what happens, and then we'll figure out what else to do. So they kind of have a run-of-the-mill type of procedure that they do first with like medicine and stuff based on your numbers, and then they see how you respond. So again, with the money thing, you could go through all of that and not get any quality eggs because,
Yeah.
you know, you never know what you're really going to get. So before all of this, I had my myomectomy in December of 2018.
Yeah, which
Well,
is
no,
removing of
2016.
fibroids.
2016. It's all a blur. I had my myomectomy, and then 6 months later, I did my egg retrieval. And in those couple of months before that, I did all my testing and all my my HSG and all that stuff. But before that, I actually had done all that testing before as well. But the time limit had run up.
Oh.
So between my diagnosis of fibroids and actually doing my egg retrieval was a year.
Oh, wow.
Because my doctor pushed for me to get into surgery, and it still took 6 months.
Wow.
And she like called the doctor and was like, you need to.
And you didn't have any symptoms of
Oh, I
your-
had symptoms.
Oh, you did. Okay. So
Yeah.
it wasn't a shock that this there was a diagnosis involved.
Yeah. Well, it was still a shock, but it wasn't, I had never heard of fibroids before.
Oh, okay.
Even though 70% of women are going to have fibroids at some point in their life. It just depends on how they affect you. But when I was trying to conceive, 3 months in, I knew something was wrong. I'd come off birth control and I started bleeding before my period. 1 day, 2 days, 7 days. So I'd end up bleeding for half of the month, up to like 15 days. And I'm like, that's not right.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually went to my doctor after about 5 months, which I know a lot of people believe that you have to wait 6 to 12 months to go to the doctor. If something is wrong and you feel like something is wrong, go. You do not have to wait till that 6 months, you know, rolls around, to that 12 months rolls around. If you think
I
something's
think
wrong,
that's a
go to
great
the
piece of
doctor.
advice too,
Right.
because
Yes.
you mentioned that you were on birth control. I'm assuming it was hormonal birth control.
Yep.
And you also mentioned that you didn't know about fibroids. You didn't know about your endometriosis. This is a very common story. Many women who have had horrible, painful, life-altering, debilitating periods, who I'm thinking, sitting here thinking, how has nobody ever evaluated you for
Those were mine.
endometriosis or fibroids? Yeah,
But
they
they
don't.
were normal for me.
Right.
And my mom also had bad periods. So this is what we thought was right.
Right.
And it's
Right.
not.
So
And
that's
it's
what I was
not.
saying. You had symptoms. You just didn't realize it was a
Yeah.
symptom of something serious.
Yeah.
And no doctor had ever said, oh, by the
Yeah.
way, you know, your
I never thought to
periods
bring
that
it up because
Yeah.
it wasn't like,
Right.
it was just my life. I had like, I started getting my period at 12 and by 14, it was debilitating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just had to take a lot of ibuprofen, too much ibuprofen.
So
Yeah.
and just
this
get through
reminds
it.
me of, I heard a talk by an acupuncturist who specializes in women's health. And I remember, this is many years ago, I remember she said that in Chinese medicine, PMS, cramps, bad menstrual periods, heavy menstrual periods, like all those things are not considered normal.
Yes, because they're not.
Right.
Mm.
But in
Yeah.
our culture, it's
Mhm.
seen, our culture and even medicine, oh, you get PMS, oh, you get moody, oh, you have a heavy period. Oh, okay. You know, like, oh, you have cramps that like you have to take medicine for a couple times a month. Yeah, that happens to people. Like
Yeah.
you, depending on which provider you see, of course. And I think
And in
things
the Western
advanced
medicine, what
now,
they
but-
do is they put people on birth control, which
Right.
actually
Yeah.
can be a great way to control your symptoms,
Sure.
but it doesn't fix the problem.
Right.
No.
So what
And
Kate
there
is
is no
describing, there's no
fix.
cure. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No cure for endometriosis.
No.
And so what Kate's describing actually happens quite often, where people come off birth control that they've been on since high school or college, and they realize, oh, I don't have a regular cycle at all, or oh,
Yeah.
my periods are debilitatingly painful and I'm hemorrhaging with my period every month. And so I agree with you, Kate. Like if you are, you know, even if it hasn't been 6 months under the age of 35, sorry, 6 months over the age of 35 or 12 months under the age of 35, if you feel like something is wrong, go in to see the doctor, even if they just book you as a preconception consultation,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I think that, it's everybody should consider seeing a midwife or an OBGYN or, somebody when they're thinking about trying to get pregnant, just to kind of run through all of that stuff.
And if the doctor doesn't listen to you, go to a different one.
Exactly.
Yeah, so true.
But I feel like you guys are always saying that.
But yeah, like by the month before I had my surgery, it was the worst period of my life. I was on the floor in the fetal position. I had to take all my clothes off. My clothes hurt to touch my body.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't stand up straight. And I was like, I can't have another period like this. And at that point, they were coming every like 21 days.
Oh, jeez.
So, and then I had my surgery, and then the period after that was awesome. It's still not great, but my doctor, my surgeon, specifically told me on my way out, he's like, you need to be pregnant, you need to be breastfeeding, you need to be on birth control at all times, or else everything's going to come back.
Wow. Wow.
Because they don't know how to suppress it or stop it, except for
Wow.
those 3 things.
Mhm.
And if a doctor tells you to get pregnant to get rid of endometriosis, don't go to them. That's not a solution.
Right. No,
No,
absolutely.
they're all just
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
band-aids.
I
Anyway.
laugh. We all laughed at that, but yes.
Yes. It's serious, but it's funny.
Yeah.
All
All right, myth 2 and 3. I feel like these are my least favorite myths at all to encounter in my life. Personally, they were my least favorite. The famous, it's all in your head. Why don't you just relax and take a vacation? Then you'll get pregnant. Followed by its evil twin, the infuriating, don't worry so much. It just takes time. You're too anxious. You'll get pregnant if you're just patient. So talk to me about these myths.
Luckily, I didn't come across that too much, but I think it's only because my timeline was so sped up by seeing my fibroids. Nobody could be like, just relax. I'm like, but there's like tumors in my uterus. Luckily, I didn't have to go through a lot of that, but people who have like unexplained infertility get this all the time. And it's just an absolutely awful thing to say to someone, especially because you're putting the blame on that person and it is not their fault.
Right.
That's not the burden you want to put on anyone.
Absolutely. I mean, infertility is a disease or condition of the reproductive system. And while relaxing may help your overall quality of life, and I know the Domar Center in Massachusetts is very famous for mind-body mindfulness and, acupuncture and that type of wellness as part of your infertility treatments. Excuse me. It is not going to cure your infertility. And, stress and deep emotional distress is the result of infertility. It's, not the cause of infertility.
And on top of that, if you're already going through the process of, going through IUIs or IVF, you're fighting like every day to get seen, to get appointments moved up, to make sure your medication arrives on time. It's a constant battle. And, at times you can go in for an appointment and then your next appointment's not for 3 months. But if you're like 39 or 40, those 3 months is a long time.
Right.
So you're constantly fighting to get seen faster, to be heard. And sometimes doctors won't do anything unless you see them face to face.
Right. Yeah. I have a funny story about this, actually, about fighting for medications to come on time. So what Kate's describing is these medications aren't something you can just pick up at CVS.
No,
they often have to be like shipped from a specialty pharmacy on ice, overnight UPS. You have to sign for the package. I remember one time I got an alert on my phone. I was in Cambridge. I was living in Central Mass, but I was at work in Cambridge and my package got delivered a day early. And I was like freaking out because I wasn't going to be home for like 10 hours. I'm like frantically calling my brother, like, can you get the package off my steps and put it in the refrigerator? Like it was just such a nightmare. So anyway, long story short is I had taken like 3 months to prepare for this cycle to get pregnant with my second, with Asa. and all the medication came except my ovulation induction medication, the Clomid. And of course, like Kate's saying, like I went through months of preparation for this, the doctor's appointments, the testing, the semen analysis, everything. And I had to start that medicine that night. Day 4 through day 9 was when I had to take the medicine. And I'm like, why is this medicine not coming? I'm calling the pharmacy. I'm only getting automation. I finally dig through my email and I find like some random email that didn't come through my main inbox that was like, we're having a little bit of an issue with shipping. Your package didn't get put on the truck. We'll send it tomorrow.
And you're like, no, you drive to my house.
So, well, that's funny you say that because I called and I wasn't horrible. I've learned in my 37 years of life that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. But I like basically pleaded. I somehow got through to a person because it was even after hours. I don't know how it happened. Someone must have stupidly picked up the phone after the phone line shut up. And I was like, you have to understand, I have to start taking this medication tonight, or I have to start all over again next month. And they actually paid like an Uber driver to drive my medicine to me. And I got it at like 10 o'clock that night and started taking it. And that was the cycle that Asa was conceived in. So you really do have to do a lot of self-advocacy.
Similar thing happened to me twice where my progesterone, they just didn't put the order in, even though I'd called and then called back to make sure it was all set. And then I didn't get it. And they had to both times send a courier to deliver it to my house.
Yeah.
And with IVF medication, it's just not like a package sitting on your doorstep. It's thousands of dollars sitting on your doorstep.
Exactly.
On ice. Like you take the day off and you wait for that package to come, and then you put it in the refrigerator immediately and you count everything to make sure it's all there because you don't want to be missing something along the lines.
Right.
Yeah. And like we were joking about in the introduction, when you have to take infertility medications, they have to be done at exactly the right time on exactly the right day. So it doesn't matter if you're at a funeral and a bachelorette party in Boston, you're shooting
your
yourself
PIO
up
goes
with
in your butt at 7.
in the bathroom, so like I remember she had a little cooler with her and everything like that, because it really does.
You're like doing the Macarena and then you're like, which one of your friends is a medical provider?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people want to go on vacation. Sorry, nope, you might be ovulating. Like want to go on a business trip. Oh, sorry, nope, you might be ovulating. Like, it controls your entire life. Controls your entire life.
I went to a concert with your sister to see the Ex-Girlfriend live, and I was doing progesterone at that point. So the weirdest place I've ever done progesterone is in the bathroom of the Chicken and Rice guys. And then I couldn't throw away my syringe, so I had to keep it like tucked into my shirt. So, and then I was like, please don't pat me down. Please don't pat me down.
Oh my gosh.
I swear to God, guys, it's just
progesterone.
And wait, and you have to keep your syringe because you're going to use it again?
I didn't want to throw it away in the bathroom.
There was no sharps container.
There was no sharps container.
Oh, because there was a needle.
It was a Chicken Rice.
Right, because you just injected. Right. Okay. Yeah.
So, long story short, infertility is a medical problem that may be treated, and at least
at a Chicken and Rice concert.
Yeah, right. At least 50% of those who complete an infertility evaluation will respond to treatment with a successful pregnancy. So I love thinking about glass half full, but as Kate said, there's also the other glass half empty, where that means 50% of people who complete an infertility evaluation might not respond to treatment and get pregnant. Some infertility problems respond with higher or lower success rates. And those that do not seek help have a spontaneous cure of only about 5% after a year of infertility. So this is also important because, everybody had a story to tell me about, my friend, got diagnosed with infertility and she tried all these rounds of IVF. It's always like the friend of a friend of the girlfriend's ex-boyfriend's sister, right? That, once they stopped trying, they got pregnant. Yeah, that does happen, but that's only 5% of the time. So stop pretending like this is the cure for infertility, because 95% of the people, if they stop trying, they don't get pregnant. So that's a large amount of people,
I knew one of those stories firsthand, and it's still, I couldn't take that, as gospel. Like I couldn't believe that. And they adopted and then got pregnant, but you shouldn't use another child as a band-aid towards your problem or to try to get pregnant. It's just like the same, get pregnant and then your endo will go away.
Right. Exactly.
Adopt and then you'll get pregnant.
I mean, you do
That's
hear
like-
those stories all the time, like, oh, we adopted and then we got pregnant, but we don't know the details of that person's infertility history.
Yeah.
Right.
Acquaintances on the street will tell me these stories.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And we might quote hear them all the time, but people are only talking about those stories because they're remarkable, right? They're not
Mm.
Yeah,
talking
nobody
about
talks about
nobody
the-
says, "Hey Kate, you're going through infertility. I have a bunch of friends that tried infertility and didn't get pregnant." Like, nobody's going to tell you that
Right.
story. Right? So, you know, everybody likes
Which-
the good feel
Which is
good
actually
story.
interesting because, right, Melissa, like when people are pregnant, everybody wants to tell you their horror stories.
Yes.
But when people are trying to get pregnant, they don't go, oh yeah, I've known like 7 people that never got pregnant.
No, it's true. Why
Right?
do they do that
Isn't
for
it so weird?
pregnancy? It's so true. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
opposite. So I have a myth that just made me think of it, which I don't know if it's a myth, because
Ooh.
as I was discussing with Melissa earlier, like I really have focused on the getting the baby out part, not the getting the baby in. So people ask me once in a while, I get an infertility question. I'm like, I do not know, and things are constantly changing. So is it really true? Like a word on the street that I feel like I hear is that after you've gone through infertility treatments, which doesn't mean anything because there's so many different types
Mhm.
and reasons for them, but that after you do it the first time and then you have a successful pregnancy, that more people get pregnant accidentally or like spontaneously with their second. How
Yes.
true is that?
It's pretty true. It's not like you can't count on it.
Yeah.
But it does happen more frequently
More often.
than the other.
Okay.
And if you think
Okay.
about why, I mean, a lot of times, like, you know, if you have a blockage in your tubes and the
Mhm.
HSG, the fluorescent dye that they put through your tubes to assess if they're open or not, if that clears up a blockage, we fix the problem, right? So sometimes, we see these successful pregnancies because potentially the diagnosis or treatment of the infertility problem fixed the problem that
Yeah.
was occurring, right? And
Right.
the other thing I'd like to say is that like Kate said, IVF is not an exact science. It's a lot of trial and error. People that are going into infertility treatments don't realize how much mistakes are made, like as part of the process, right? Not mistakes, but like how many
Trial and
quote,
error.
failures there are, right?
Yeah.
Before you get a success, because it's like, okay, this failed, but I'm going to look at all her numbers and figure out, okay, maybe I can adjust the date on this and the dose on this and the medicine on that. And then we'll try this. Okay, that didn't work. I'm going to assess all the numbers and then I'm going to adjust, make these tweaks, right? So there's a lot of these like failures that you learn from. So if they've already figured out a formula, right, quote unquote, that worked for you last time, they're going to start with that one the second time. And so you might get pregnant on your first try because you kind of have an idea of where to start. And then the other thing I like to say, and this happens with people with infertility or not infertility, but if you're going to ovulate, for most people, ovulation causes an increase in your sex drive. And so if you are busy with your toddler and you ovulate, and it's the first time in 3 years that you've actually wanted to have sex with your husband, right? Because you actually have desire and you do. And then you find out that you're pregnant. People are like, what are the odds of this happening? And I'm over here thinking like, actually pretty good because you were horny that night.
Right.
That meant you ovulated. So you actually need to be super careful about the times when you actually do want to have sex. That's when you're probably most fertile.
Wow. That's a big PSA for the day. I like it.
No, it's true. That's why people get pregnant 3 months after their baby was born, right? They have the oopsie pregnancy because, they actually have desire and that,
Mhm.
let me tell you what crushes your desire: infertility treatment.
Yes.
Wow. All right. So another myth is that infertility is a woman's problem.
Nope. Well, it can be a wide range of things. It can be, usually the way I put it, just as like a quick way to tell people, it's a third is the woman, a third is the man, a third is unexplained.
Mm.
I know that
Is it that high that a third of infertility situations are unexplained?
Those are the numbers that I've been
Wow.
seen across the internet in the past couple of years, is that it can be up to a third.
Yeah. Somewhere between 10 and 30%. And somewhere between around 20% of that unexplained is because it's maybe some combination of male and female infertility together.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So it's not just a woman's problem.
Nope.
And this was, when infertility treatments actually started in, the early mid 20th century, it was considered so taboo to even suggest that the man might have the problem
Oh yeah.
that,
I mean, let's just talk about King Henry VIII. Like,
exactly.
prime example.
Oh
He
my
thought it was the
gosh.
lady's fault that he wasn't getting a son.
Yep,
Wow.
yep. So he just
Nope.
kept killing them all, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was so taboo to even,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
talk about the patriarchy, right? And,
Yeah.
and misogyny and whatnot. But you know, that they didn't even like start testing men for like decades after they started, like, you know,
Right.
trying to treat infertility in women. They just kept assuming, you know, doctors, right? Like would never
Yeah.
consider testing a man. What would never be his sperm. He's fertile, you know, he's
Yeah.
virile man. So yeah, that this, unfortunately, it's 2021 and this myth persists.
Yes.
Like, you know. All right, last up, myth number
Swimmers.
5. But you're so young, Kate. You have plenty of time to get pregnant, right? Tell me more.
Yeah. It doesn't matter at all. I mean, I was 30 when I started everything and found out I had unknown fibroids, like just turned 30. And you know, I know people who've, you know, gotten pregnant naturally at 43. And I also know people who have used donor eggs and sperm at 28, 29. It doesn't matter. And also just telling somebody that they have time only lasts for so long until they don't have time. And then you're like, well, what were you doing with all this time?
Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah.
I remember, you know, I started trying to get pregnant at 27 and didn't end up having Pierce until I was 29, just shy of 30. And I heard that a lot, you know, like, but you're so young, you have plenty of time. And for me, it didn't matter that, I guess technically I had like 13 more years of time before menopause. Like that wasn't when I wanted to have a baby. Like
Yeah.
I didn't want, I mean, not that I'm against anybody who has a baby at 43, but I didn't want to be 43 and have a baby.
Not
I
what
felt
you
this,
wanted to do.
right. Talk about FOMO, right? Like I felt like the people around me that I knew were having children, and if I had to wait 13 years to have a baby, their kids are all grown up. Like I just felt like,
But also, what if you wanted 9 kids?
Yeah.
absolutely. That's the other
There
thing
are
too, right?
people who want lots of children. We probably, I mean, I know we know some people, and they may want to have many children. And so they may need to start early because that's what they want.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, I mean,
But God, you know, I would imagine, just knowing these people that I know, that the reaction in our culture to someone having more than 4 or 5 children is actually probably pretty harsh too.
oh
So
yeah,
if
totally.
you started to say, without having any children yet, well, I want to start now because my partner and I really want to have a lot of kids. Like then you're going to get a whole bunch of other comments being made.
Because
Oh, yeah.
everybody has a comment.
Yeah.
Everybody has a comment.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, the reality is that, you know, 80% of couples that are actively trying to conceive will conceive within a year of timed intercourse. So again, one thing I recommend for anybody that's, you know, thinking about trying to get pregnant is have that preconception consultation and learn about your body, because you would be shocked at how many people in their 20s and 30s do not understand the reproductive cycle, like the menstrual cycle. They've been on birth control for so long, they don't realize that that's been suppressing their ovulation. They don't understand how to like look for signs of ovulation. And they might have been trying for X amount of months, but actually not having timed intercourse, meaning timing intercourse around their most fertile time of the month. And so, I mean, 80% of people will get pregnant within 12 months of not using birth control, right? So like it does work out. There are plenty of people who, you know, didn't time their intercourse and got pregnant. But if this is something that you're trying for, you know, learn about your body. There's a great book. It's kind of like that gold standard, like it's called Taking Charge of Your Fertility. It's an excellent read, just to learn about your body and kind of maximize your chances. So 80% of couples under 35 will conceive. But
I was going to say, but now there's apps.
There are
right?
apps.
So there's so many apps, it
Yeah.
seems. And I just know this from having a daughter who is 20 now, but just like you can easily track it so much easier. Like Taking Charge Your Infertility, I believe, has a chart in there that, and I've seen different charts where you can, on paper, you can write things down, but to have an app in your phone and just be able to, you know, tap something or be like, oh, this is what's going on in my body right now, I think is so much more convenient, which is really nice.
There
Did
are
you use any
bracelets
apps?
too that can like I think they read your basal temperature in the morning and
wow.
like different stuff, so it can like predict it. I bought that book and then immediately knew I had fibroids and went,
Yeah.
it? And threw it out the window, gave it to someone else. Because it wasn't something that I could fix myself.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
also, you should never try to like self-medicate or be like, oh, maybe this will help me or this herb. It can really throw you off. Do not Google things. Get off the Google sometimes.
I agree with that. I mean,
It's
these
really hard not to
infertility
go down
forums.
that Google rabbit hole real
Yeah.
quick with
Well, it's
all
so
of the
personal. I
info.
mean, the same thing with lactation, you know, like
Oh yeah.
you can Google stuff and yes, that might be true. Well, A, it could be false, but
Right.
it could be true, but
Yeah.
not for you. You
Yeah.
know, you can't
And then you
apply
just
what they read.
every, like after you do transfer, you're like, all right, what are symptoms for 5 days past 5-day transfer? And like you're just Googling constantly, just trying to figure out what's going on with your body and put the phone down. Just
I know. Sometimes you have to like, I know what I used to do is, so anybody who's going through infertility treatments knows what 2WW is, the 2-week wait, right? This is when, after you've had intercourse or IUI, or you've had your transfer, you have to wait 2 weeks to see if you're pregnant, right? To get that positive home pregnancy test, or what we call BFP, big fat positive, or BFN, big fat negative.
I call them a different thing in my head that I won't say out loud.
So,
There has been cursing on the show almost every episode, just in case.
Oh, do you want me to say it?
Yeah, say it.
I can imagine
It's
what it
either
is.
a big fucking negative or a big fucking positive.
I like that. I like that.
I also hate all those little, the little jargon.
Oh, I know. I agree too, but you get sucked into it. You know, you
penis
just
and vagina, people.
Yeah.
There's no baby dancing.
Yeah,
I
right.
hate it.
Oh,
Baby
my God.
dancing? Oh, you mean
Oh,
like
yeah, having
Mhm.
sex.
Yeah.
Like people will be like,
they call it a baby dance?
oh
Yep.
yeah. But everything's like euphemism. So like they'll be like,
Oh.
hi gals, I'm currently on my 2WW. I just baby danced with DH, which is dear husband.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Darling,
It's
it's
unbelievable.
darling
Darling
husband.
husband.
Yes, I have seen that
And-
one too.
And you're just like, I agree. I would, it's cringeworthy, but you learn the lingo because if you're, doing,
Because you have
Googling
to.
it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, but I do
Yes.
recommend that. I like that, Kate, you talked about finding that niche, small group of people to, whether it's an online support group or an in-person support group, is really essential to kind of commiserate and support each other. But these big forums sometimes just become, and same with pregnancy, due date clubs. I've had some people
Mhm.
sign up for the babycenter.com due date club or whatever website due date club, and find a small group of people that they connect with that kind of branch off and have like a Google chat together or whatnot. But a lot of these big forums are a lot of bad information,
Mhm.
right? Things that completely don't apply to you,
Mhm.
or are just cesspools of anxiety, right?
Well, also, you
some
don't even know who's
negativity.
really in them, right?
Right.
And so
right.
you might be posting something that is private, and then who knows who's really in that group
Mhm.
looking at that.
Yeah.
Just be careful with that. Like if you realize like you're just drowning in other people's anxiety
Mhm.
because you're in this, big forum for infertility support, like find another find another support group.
Unless
But you
you
also
physically know those people behind those names, then you don't know those people. We've actually, this is kind of controversial, but in one of the larger support groups, at one point we had a nurse from one of the fertility centers in the group who was a spy.
Oh, I'm not surprised about that at all. Yeah.
No, but we were very upset.
Oh, of course you would be. But like, as
Yeah.
you're telling, I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds like that is definitely
Yeah.
real.
So now people are in the group I used to be in. I'm not in that one anymore, but like people are vetted like
Mhm.
heavily
Yeah.
to make sure that they're not spies for
Yeah.
doctors, which is terrible.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man.
I mean, that's like online support, but like, what did you do to get support by real actual people that you knew or would see for your process when you were going through that journey? And what were some of the things that people did? So like those who are listening, what could they do
Yeah.
to support someone that they know is going through this?
Yeah. How did your friends and family help you?
So everybody knew I had surgery because you can't hide surgery.
Now, was this a day surgery? I would assume.
It was
but I
a
don't
day
know.
surgery, but I
Okay.
was in at 7 a.m. and I left at 7 p.m.
Okay.
And I did not have a good recovery for the first like day or two. They gave me an anti-nausea patch and it stopped me from peeing. And then I couldn't go. And they were like, we're going to have to send you home with a catheter. And I was like, no, I'm leaving. Goodbye. And just, I left. And then my meds wore off and everything wore off. And then I was in excruciating pain because I had to pee so bad, but I was in so much pain I couldn't realize I had to pee. And then once I peed, I was fine. But it was a 2-week recovery. It was laparoscopic, but still there's a ton of incisions in there. I had 8 fibroids. I had multiple stage 4 endo classic chocolate cysts in there, which I didn't know I had until they went in for surgery. Mm-hmm. My doctor was like, yeah, you had endo in there. Why didn't you tell me? I'm like, I didn't know.
Why didn't you tell me?
So it was a day surgery, but it was 2 weeks of recovery. And then it was, 3 months before I could have any testing started. And then I had to wait 6 months before I could do any sort of IVF to get pregnant. But in that time, everybody knew I had surgery. Only a very small handful of people knew that I was going through IVF. I didn't really tell my parents. My sister knew. For me, I didn't want 20 plus people checking up on me at all times. I didn't want to have to tell 20 plus people that I had a failed transfer. And I think that finding those couple people to tell, you can tell as many people as you want, obviously, it's you, do whatever you want.
Right.
But if you find those couple people who get it, it makes the experience so much better and so much easier. And it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to find those couple people who you're like, I know how you're going to react. And I know you're not going to tell me the wrong things. Mm-hmm. You're the person I'm going to tell. Mm-hmm. Marlena was one, of course.
Yeah, my sister. She was on our show too.
And also, you don't owe that story to anyone else. Mm-hmm. You can tell whoever you want. You don't have to tell your mom. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't want to. It was just, I wanted to be able to tell her the happy ending. I didn't want to have to tell her the whole spiel going up to it. But you don't owe that to anyone. You don't have to tell anybody your story except for who you want to know it. And on the other side, if you're a person who's being told about that, or if you're a friend of somebody who you know is going through the process and you have a baby or you're pregnant, they might not talk to you for a little while, and that's nothing against you. They're protecting themselves. It's normal. They just need to go into their own little space right now and protect their feelings and protect themselves. They don't hate you. They just need to take care of themselves right now, which I think is hard because some people are like, why isn't this person talking to me or telling me everything that's going on? And you just have to see it from their side for a second.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I also would say to anybody going through infertility treatments, give yourself permission to not go to a baby shower. Right. Mm-hmm. To not go to a kid's birthday party. You don't owe anybody an explanation. You can just say, I'm busy or I'm not feeling well. It is not a selfish thing. I love kids. I'm the oldest of 7 kids of 20 grandkids. I'm that total goofball aunt. That's the one, in the mm-hmm. trampoline. But when I was going through, my 3rd miscarriage, no, I didn't want to go to a kid's birthday party. And it wasn't against that kid or wasn't against that family member, but I just needed to not have to field those questions and not have to just feel that pain that intensely mm-hmm. for that day. I have a happy ending, my story, and I'm really grateful that I do. And I go to those birthday parties and baby showers, but you're not selfish for taking care of yourself in those moments.
And also that reminded me that if you are that person who becomes pregnant and you have an infertile friend or somebody going through, all of that, text them that you're pregnant. Do not call them. Mm-hmm. Do not tell them in person. Text them, say, hey, I mean, no fanciness to it. Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm telling you that I'm pregnant. It's okay if you don't talk to me for a little while. I want to tell you here so that you can, compress it yourself. And then you talk to me when you want to.
Yeah. I agree. Text, email, something where they, you're not like, hey, guess what? I'll never forget somebody I'm very, very close to, right after I had my 3rd loss was I was at their house for dinner and they were like, we hadn't even eaten yet. And they were mm-hmm. like, guess what? We're having our 3rd. And I just wanted to puke. I love this person, right? Like a sister. And I'm so happy. And it turns out that I actually got pregnant like the next month. So our kids are actually a month apart, same age, you know. But I bawled my eyes out for the hour drive home. I had to sit through that dinner and talk, you know, especially since I'm a labor and delivery nurse. So normally I do love to talk about that stuff, but at that time I did not, you know. I'd also recommend, if you're somebody who is going through infertility treatments, consider if there's a lot of people in your life that are just asking questions that are, you know, just don't feel good to have to field all the time. When are you going to have a baby? Why are you waiting so long? I sent an email out actually to like my aunts and uncles, my older cousins, my very best friends, my parents and my in-laws. And I just sent an email that was like, hey, just wanted to let you know this is what Paul and I are going through. We just had our third miscarriage. We are going to start infertility workup and treatment. We have no information for you. Here's an article from resolve.org about things that you can do and say. You know, I went right to their website and sent them that website.
I'm pretty sure I have that page bookmarked.
Right?
Send it to people.
I was so nervous about it. I didn't know if it was going to be inviting too many people in, but in my situation, it actually was the best thing I did, because it stopped all of that, you know, when are you gonna have a baby? Why aren't you pregnant yet? Right? It stopped all of that right away. I got so many great emails back from like my Uncle Dave, even like, this is somebody that I wouldn't, you know, it was just like, I had no idea. We love you. We're thinking about you. You know, we're going to be silently rooting for you on the sidelines. It was such a weight lifted off of me that people knew, hey, guess what? I have been trying. Guess what? I had 3 losses. I'm really grieving it right now. And I don't need you know, the 20 questions at the cookout, right?
Yeah.
On a lighter note, one of my favorite quotes ever was from a good friend of my husband's who is like 6'5" or 6'7", like very tall man. And after he and his wife had one baby, I think it ended up being, he said people would ask him like, so are you guys like working on another baby? Are you guys gonna have another kid? You know, like, and he would look down at them and go, are you asking me if I'm having sex with my wife?
Yeah. It's like the worst thing you can ask someone.
But it was such a great comeback. So like if anybody has like a little tiny bit of sarcasm, you know, in their bones, like it shuts people up.
Yeah.
Like,
and I mean, obviously it depends on your relationship with that person.
Of course.
To a really good friend and I'm like, so are you thinking about like having more kids, or like, are you done? Or like, if I know that's the right person, that's fine. But don't say it to people you like barely know
at a cookout.
Or, you know.
Oh my gosh. One thing I'd also like to add is like, if you're a family member, like do a little research on your own. You know, like if somebody you know is going through infertility or has a diagnosis of fibroids, or, you know, is starting IVF, like read a couple articles, go to resolve.org. There's a whole page on resolve.org of family and resources for family and friends, and like learn a little bit about it. Like same idea for everything, right? For race, for LGBTQ issues, for all, you know, like don't make those people have to teach you.
Although I will gladly teach you.
Yes, well, give Kate a call. Actually, Kate will talk about it. I am also similarly like that, but you know, other people, like they don't want to have to go through every single detail. You know, at least gives you a perspective like, wow, okay, it's not just quote do IVF. There's a lot involved here.
Yeah. But also in that same regard, it kind of goes under the not helpful thing is don't try to give them solutions. Like, you know what I mean? Like, don't ever preference something with just do this or just this. There's never any situation where it just is justified.
Well, that actually brings me to our next question, was what things are not helpful. I'm going to give a PSA for all of our listeners. Never start a sentence with someone who's trying to get pregnant with, have you tried X? Because I will tell you what, they have tried X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They have tried acupuncture. They have tried herbs, they have tried, nutrition, they have tried everything. And I mean, I think it's one thing to like maybe send an article to someone about, hey, I just heard this really awesome podcast on the Babies in Common show about, a functional nutritionist and how it can help with infertility. I was thinking of you and I wanted to send it to you. That's a lot different than, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that in the middle of the cookout? It's like, God, yeah, I have.
And again, like it depends on the relationship. If somebody's talking to me specifically because they know I've been through it and I'm asking them, I'm like, basically, where have you been down the line? What have you done so far? Completely different. But again, at a barbecue,
right.
Don't just throw out random things.
Well, and one of the things that people will say is like, oh, you could always adopt, but adoption is so also hard.
It's ridiculously
to go
hard.
through the process to actually get a child, either somebody who was born in the United States or from another country. It is a hard, long process.
And also adoption is not a cure for infertility,
right.
Meaning there are plenty of people, infertile or not, that choose adoption. It's a wonderful, I look up to people who adopt. I think that's a wonderful way to build your family. That is a way to build your family. That is not a cure for the grief of infertility. Many infertile couples do end up perhaps choosing adoption, and that is wonderful. But to tell somebody who's struggling to get pregnant or has just had their third miscarriage, well, you can just adopt, is like a big slap in the face because as you've said, it's expensive. It's incredibly long process. It's an incredibly personally invasive process.
And same thing with IVF, there's no guarantee of a baby.
Right. There's no guarantee of a baby. But also, the desire to have a biological child is something that's deeply ingrained in the core of our humanness, right? I'm not saying that to mean that everybody who has a uterus wants to carry a baby or that every couple wants to have children. I don't mean that. I just mean that this desire for children is something that is primal and deep within us. And there's grief to infertility. You will mourn the loss of the family that you wanted to have if this is something that you are going through, right? So to just tell people like you can just adopt, they might eventually choose that. That might be the route that they use to build their family. That doesn't take the pain away, the grief away of loss, right? Of a child or of infertility. So that's just not a helpful thing to say.
And also if somebody comes up to you and is like, oh, I think, we're thinking about, having a baby at some point or soon. Nobody's ever like, well, did you consider adoption?
Right, exactly. That's so true.
Right. And I hate it's just this thing that's put onto infertile people. And it's just not fair to just kind of push that option onto someone when it might not be what they want.
Right. Yep.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for sharing your story and coming on our show. And as an additional piece of support and help, and I know Melissa's brought this up a few times, like resolve.org, a compassionate support and information about infertility, both for people who are going through this, who are curious about maybe going into infertility treatment. It's also great for family members. So it's free or low cost, and there's programs, there's local communities, there's meetings. I've known some people who are Resolve counselors who used to actually have meetings in person back in the day when we were still doing that. Someday again. Is there anything else? And men too, right? So it's not just for people.
Yeah, they have a lot of different subcategories.
What else?
Which I can't remember any off the top of my head.
But or just like what else do they do?
Oh, Resolve.
Yeah, at this point. So it's online meetings, in-person meetings, maybe?
I never went to any of the ones online just because I found those people that were my people.
Oh, right. Yep.
Yeah. But I do know that I think it's only online right now. And I do know that they have like, subgroups that's very specific to what you might be going through.
Oh, good.
Like, I think there's LGBTQ plus ones. I think that there's donor one, because donor's the limbo of adoption and IVF that doesn't get talked about enough. And they just have a lot of little groups, and it's all across the country.
Good.
Yeah, all across the country. They run conferences, support groups. They have they do a lot of advocacy and campaigning for infertility coverage in different states that don't have insurance coverage. They're just a really great place to start. Do you have any other resources, books or websites or favorite, online groups that you might direct people to, Kate, if they're looking for information?
I don't have any specifically off the top of my head.
Definitely not that really large Facebook group that you
No,
have.
you can
Right.
join it and find people who might be around you or might be going through something similar and kind of be like, hey, do you want to start a little subgroup? There's no hurt in like joining a Facebook group and then leaving.
Mhm.
You
Right.
don't like them.
That is very true.
You don't
That is
have to
very true.
stay.
Yeah.
We hope that all of our listeners has found a meaningful takeaway from this episode. And I know that all of us on the show are currently sending some virtual sticky vibes. And if you're going through fertility treatment, you know what I mean. Eat all the pineapple. Sticky vibes to all our listeners who are currently on their own infertility journey. And we hope you receive good news soon, because we want to see you at Babies in Common to help you rock your birth and thrive as a new parent. Remember, Babies in Common is a community for you. After all, we have babies in common.
Aw, sweet. Awesome. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you so much, Kate.